Clara didn't know exactly when she had become invisible. Perhaps it was the day his mother was buried in silence, in a forgotten cemetery on the outskirts of the city. Or maybe it was before that, when neighbors stopped greeting, when food began to run out, when toys disappeared from the room, and bedtime stories were no longer told. By the age of 9, she had already experienced more losses than many adults. And now, there, lying in an old bunk bed inside a gray, stuffy orphanage, she wondered if anyone, somewhere, still knew she existed. The orphanage was on a street with heavy traffic, hidden behind peeling walls and windows fogged by the dust of time. The director, Donna Regina, was a stern, practical woman, and not used to demonstrations of affection. He kept the corridors clean, the meals on time, and the reports up to date. But he rarely smiled. For her, Clara was just one of the many children who entered and left the system, often without leaving any memory. Clara, however, had something that distinguished her. It was not beauty nor forced sympathy. It was a quiet sadness, combined with genuine sweetness that came through in the small gestures, like helping the little ones get dressed or sharing the last piece of bread with someone crying. She spoke little but looked a lot. He observed the world with unusual attention, as if absorbing everything in silence. And so, despite being almost invisible to adults, she was admired by other children, who saw her as a safe haven in a sea of uncertainty. Every morning started the same. Waking up at 6, queuing for bathroom, breakfast with dry bread and thin milk, and then impromptu classes in the community hall. The books were old, the pencils broken, but Clara made a point of learning. He knew that knowledge was his only way out. At night, when everyone was asleep, she would curl up under the thin blanket and dream of things she didn't dare tell anyone. A family, a house that smelled of hot food, a doll with real hair. She has never had a doll. He never received birthday presents. He never blew out cake candles. But every afternoon when the routine allowed, Clara went out with a group of children to walk under the supervision of a monitor. And it was at that moment that she felt the most hope, because they passed by the windows of the city center, windows that shone like parallel universes. And Clara could imagine herself inside them. She could imagine herself wearing the swirl dresses, play with the colorful games, holding the blonde doll that always appeared in the corner of the window of a particular store. This doll was a symbol of everything she didn't have. Delicate face, blue satin dress, eyes that blinked in golden curls. It cost more than all the shoes in the orphanage combined. But Clara didn't want to steal it. She just wanted to look, touching her fingers to the glass and pretending, for a few seconds, that the world inside was also yours. On a specific Sunday, a day of little movement, with clear skies and fresh wind, Clara went out alone. He had found a one real coin dropped near the gate and decided to use it to buy something sweet. But halfway through, as if guided by an impulse greater than herself, she deviated from her route. She walked downtown, rounded the street corners, crossed the cobblestones, and stopped in front of the doll shop. His heart was pounding. For the first time, she would not be content to just look out the window. He pushed the glass door cautiously. A little bell rang. The aroma of perfume, leather, and new plastics invaded her senses. Clara entered. Her wide eyes explored the space. It was even more beautiful inside. It was empty, silent. It felt like a temple of things she could never have. She walked slowly to the shelf. He stretched out his trembling fingers and touched it all. Soft, hot, perfect. An involuntary smile escaped. For the first time in a long time, Clara was happy, just by touching something that symbolized what she wanted most. Belonging. That's when he heard heavy footsteps behind him. "Hey, what do you think you're doing here?" It was a security guard. Tall, with his arms crossed, his brow furrowed. Clara turned around, frightened. He tried to explain, but he didn't want to listen. "A place for street children is not here. Go out now, or I'll call the police." He grabbed her by the arm. She dropped the doll, which fell to the ground. Customers began to notice. Some ladies wrinkled their noses. One man muttered something about lack of vigilance. Clara was pushed to the door. Outside, he tripped on the sidewalk and fell to his knees. The coin he was carrying escaped from his pocket and rolled to the curb. She didn't go after it. He only lowered his head. The tears flowed, but she tried not to sob. No one helped her. Nobody cared, except for one woman. Across the street, sitting in a cafe with a porcelain cup in her hands, Helena Duarte watched the scene. Her gaze went to the glass of the cafeteria, fixed on the small, dirty, yet incredibly dignified girl, trying to compose herself on her own. Helena felt something in her chest, something I hadn't felt in a long time. And there, without knowing it yet, two lives that seemed completely distant. They were about to cross paths forever. That night, Clara did not sleep. Sitting on the edge of the bunk, her knees hugged against her chest, she relived the expulsion scene as a repeated movie. The security guard's voice still echoed in her ears. His hand still hurt from the push against the sidewalk. But what hurt the most, it was a feeling of being treated like garbage, as if touching a doll were a crime. In the next room, the children were sleeping. Some snored softly. Others murmured words interspersed with dreams. But Clara was awake, and for the first time, a new feeling began to form within her. Anger. Not anger at someone specific, but at that silent injustice that seemed to accompany her since she was born. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in an elegant apartment, Helena Duarte was also awake. Sitting on the sofa, with a forgotten glass of wine in her hand, she mentally reviewed the image of the girl lying on the sidewalk. There was something about Clara that wouldn't leave her head. Perhaps it was a look of someone who had already lost a lot, but still resisted. Helena was a successful 42-year-old woman who owned a business consulting firm that served large corporations. Widowed for 3 years, she lived alone in a large apartment, decorated with works of art and books everywhere. She never had children. She had thought about it once or twice, but work, commitments, and the rush of life always made her put off the idea. Until that afternoon. Even that girl. The next day, Helena went to the store. He asked to see the security cameras. He wanted to understand exactly what had happened. The manager hesitated, but recognized a regular customer and authorized it. He saw Clara entering shyly, walking to the doll, smiling, a simple, beautiful, rare smile, and then the cruel scene of the expulsion. That bothered her deeply. She didn't know why she was getting involved, but there was something in that look, something that hurt. Helena asked for the child's name. The security guard didn't know. It must be from the orphanage on Rua Visconde. These children live prowling around here, he said disdainfully. Helena wrote down the name of the street and left determined. At the orphanage, Clara remained silent. Since the event, he spoke even less. Donna Regina noticed, but interpreted it as a tantrum. "This girl needs to stop dreaming big," she commented to the monitor. "Her life will be just like that. She better get used to it." It was then that the improbable happened. On Wednesday at 10 a.m., a black Mercedes parked in front of the orphanage gate. Helena came down with firm and elegant steps. The bell rang. The employee, seeing such a well-dressed woman there, ran to call the director. Minutes later, Helena was sitting in the office, explaining, "I'm not here for charity. I'm here because I saw an injustice happen, and because I believe this girl deserves a chance. I want to meet her." Donna Regina hesitated. "You know it's not that simple. Adoption as a process. And this girl, Clara, she is quiet, shy. I don't even know if he's going to open up to you." "I just want to talk," Helena replied. When Clara was called, she thought she had done something wrong. He entered the room slowly, his eyes downcast. But as soon as he saw the woman sitting there, the same one who had looked at her from across the street that day, his eyes widened. Helena smiled sweetly. "Hi, Clara. Remember me?" Clara nodded timidly. "You like dolls, right?" She did not answer, but the way he bit his lower lip said it all. Helena continued, "I saw what happened in the store. That was wrong. No one should be treated like that, especially someone like you." Clara looked away. That moved her too much. Helena then approached and, in a very calm tone, said, "Would you like to spend a day away from here? Just for sightseeing. I'll bring you back, if you want. But what if you could see another world?" Donna Regina interfered. "It's against the rules. We cannot allow this." But Helena was already prepared. He presented documents, showed records, even prior authorization for supervised visits, all perfectly legal. After much insistence, the director allowed a small walk, with supervision, that afternoon. For the first time in months, Claire left the orphanage not with other children, but next to a woman who gave her hand firmly and affectionately. They passed by bookstores, ate ice cream, walked hand in hand through park. Clara laughed shyly. She felt strange, out of place, but happy. At the end of the day, Helena took her to the store's window. The same doll was still there. "Is that the one?" he asked. Clara nodded. Helena entered, bought the doll, and delivered it into the girl's hands. "She's now yours." Clara looked at the doll, then Helena, and began to cry. But it wasn't sadness. It was gratitude. It was the weight of years of abandonment being broken by a simple gesture. That was only the first visit. What came next? It would change everything forever. In the days that followed the outing with Helena, something changed inside Clara. It wasn't just because of the doll, though she treasured it, sleeping with it in her arms every night. What really moved Clara was that strange but good feeling of having been seen. For the first time in a long time, someone saw who she was, and not just what she seemed to be. At the orphanage, the other children noticed that Clara smiled more. She was still shy. She still isolated herself sometimes, but there was a different sparkle in her eyes. Donna Regina watched with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. It was not common for someone rich to show so much interest in any orphan. "This won't last," she said to herself. "Soon this woman will disappear, like everyone else." But Helena did not disappear. In fact, it returned the following weekend. I brought books, sweets, and a special invitation. "Clara, there's going to be an event at my company. A lunch with music, delicious food, a real party. I would very much like you to be like my guest. What do you think?" Clara widened her eyes. She had never been to a real party, let alone a fancy company. He looked at Donna Regina in doubt. The principal sighed, overcome by the girl's enthusiasm and the woman's insistence. "That's okay, but she has to come back the same day." Helena smiled. "Of course." On the morning of the event, Clara was taken to a beauty salon. She had her hair washed and combed with delicacy. She wore a light blue dress that looked like it came out of a fairy tale. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. And for the first time in her life, she thought she was beautiful. The driver opened the door of the Mercedes, and she entered like a princess. As the car advanced through the streets of the city, Clara saw everything through the window with eyes of discovery. The world seemed new. It was no longer that cold, hard place she knew. It was a place where maybe, just maybe, she could belong. Helena's company building was immense, with mirrored windows that reflected the sky. Clara held the woman's hand tightly as she entered. Inside, people smiled. Waiters passed by with elegant trays. Music played softly. Several employees approached to praise the boss's special guest. "Is it your daughter?" asked one of them, smiling. Helena hesitated. He looked at Clara, and before she could answer, the girl lowered her eyes, unsure. "For now, it's just my friend," Helena replied, caressing the girl's shoulder. "But who knows, maybe one day." Clara didn't know what that meant exactly, but she felt her heart race. During the party, she approached a bookcase. He took a copy, leafed through it carefully. Helena approached slowly. "Do you like to read?" "Yes," replied Clara, almost in a whisper. "It's as if I could go to other places without leaving the place." Helena smiled. "That was exactly the reason I fell in love with books. They gave me wings. And maybe I can help you have yours." At the end of the event, Clara did not want to leave, but I knew I needed to. When the car dropped her off at the orphanage gate, she looked at Helena with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "Thank you for today," she said, holding the doll in her arms, still wearing the beautiful dress. Helena hugged her. "Clara, I wanted to ask you a question, but I want you to think calmly." The girl stared at her, attentively. "Would you like to come live with me?" Clara was silent. Her heart seemed to beat so hard that it could be heard outside. I don't know how it works, if it will be possible, but I'm willing to fight for it. I just need to know if it's what you want too. The tears came down without Clara noticing. She just nodded, unable to say a word. That night, Clara cried again, but with relief. On the other side of town, Helena opened the computer and began to fill out the first forms of the adoption process. She was decided. From that moment on, Clara would never be alone again. Helena's request was simple, but life's response, not so much. When Clara said yes with her eyes full of hope, neither of them imagined the mountain they would have to climb. Helena was a powerful woman, owner of an admired company, but in the face of bureaucracy, prejudice, and rigidity of the system, even her influence seemed small. The next day, she personally went to the orphanage to talk to Donna Regina and start the adoption procedures. But the reception was not as warm as she had hoped. "Are you sure what you're doing?" asked the director, her arms crossed. "Adopt a 9-year-old girl, orphaned, with a history of abandonment? Do you know what that means?" "It means she needs someone, and I'm willing to be that someone." Donna Regina did not answer. He only delivered the first forms. The following days were a storm. Documents, interviews, visits from social workers, psychological tests, uncomfortable questions, doubts that tried to tear from Helena's heart the firmness that she showed so much. She needed to prove that she was not just a rich woman wanting to play mother, but someone willing to love, care for, and fight for that child, as if it were blood of her blood. Meanwhile, Clara lived between anxiety and fear. Every night, he looked at the doll that Helena had given him and wondered if it was all real. What if they gave it up? What if everything was just a beautiful dream about to end? But Helena did not give up. She attended all the interviews. He opened the doors of his house. He showed his finances, his routine, his values. She even revealed old scars, including the pain of never having been able to have children. He shared with the psychologist of the process the most intimate truth, that he had found in Clara a connection that he had not felt with anyone since the death of his parents years ago. "She reminds me of who I was first of all. But more than that, it makes me want to be someone better." Even with all this, the difficulties persisted. There were rules, protocols, deadlines, and the system, slow as ever, seemed to put an obstacle at every turn. One of the social workers, Marta, did not hide her distrust. A poor girl, kicked out of the store, now being adopted by one of the most influential women in the city? It's a good story, but is it real? Helena stared at her firmly. "It's not a story, it's our life." Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Donna Regina watched Clara's transformation. The girl now helped the other children, smiled more, read to the little ones before going to sleep. There was a hope in her that seemed to infect the whole environment. On a Sunday of visits, Helena took Clara for a walk in park. They sat on the grass, ice cream in hand, and talked about the future. "Do you want to change schools?" asked Helena. "I don't know. I just want to be where you are." This sentence dismantled Helena from the inside. She knew she couldn't fail. Finally, after weeks of waiting, the big day arrived. A definitive meeting with the judge in charge of the case. Helena entered the courtroom with her hands sweating, but with a steady gaze. The judge read the papers in silence. Then he looked at Clara, who was next to Helena, in a white dress and frightened eyes. "Clara, do you want to move in with this woman?" The girl took a deep breath, and, with a choked voice, he replied, "It's already my home." There was a deep silence. The judge closed the portfolio, then let it be official. Helena couldn't hold back her tears. Neither does Clara. On the way out of the forum, the new mother and daughter hugged for minutes, in the middle of the sidewalk, ignoring the cars, the people, the world. The battle for adoption was over, but the real transformation was just getting started. The morning after the adoption, Clara woke up in a room that seemed to have come out of a dream. It was the first time she had slept in a bed of her own. White sheets, fluffy pillows, lace curtains that danced with the wind. From the ceiling hung a colored mobile that rotated slowly, and which, according to Helena, had been ordered especially for her. Everything was new, but what impressed Clara most were not the objects. It was silence and peace. No screaming from other children. No slamming doors. No cold rules dictated by worksheets. For the first time, she could take a deep breath without fear, and that, for someone like Clara, was more valuable than any toy. Helena prepared breakfast with her own hands. Warm breads, fruits cut into the shape of hearts, and a glass of fresh orange juice. "I hope you like it," she said, smiling. Clara smiled back, still not knowing exactly how to behave, not knowing if it was all really real. Over the days, the routine was slowly built. Clara started attending a new school, private, modern, full of opportunities that she did not even imagine existed. At first, she felt out of place. The other children came from different families, talked about trips she had never taken, used difficult words. But gradually, her curiosity and Helena's patience helped her find her own rhythm. Helena hired a tutor to help her with the more advanced subjects. She also encouraged Clara to participate in ballet, guitar, and even robotics classes, so that she could find out what she was really good at. At first, Clara refused gifts. Whenever Helena showed up with new clothes or toys, she was silent, afraid of looking ungrateful or that everything would be taken away later. That was a reflection of the years in the orphanage, of the insecurity embedded in his soul. But Helena never forced it. It just said, "It's okay, my love. You don't have to please me. I just want to see you happy." These words were like bricks building, little by little, a new foundation within Clara. She was still frightened by simple gestures, a compliment, a hug, a sweet word. But love, that true, steadfast, silent love, was beginning to take effect. One of the most memorable moments was when Helena took Clara back to the store where she had been expelled some time ago. "Why are we here?" the girl whispered uncomfortably. "Because I want you to see with your own eyes that you belong anywhere, that no one else will treat you as invisible." As they entered, curious looks immediately appeared. But this time, Clara was next to an elegant, confident woman, and the whole store knew who she was. The manager, upon recognizing them, swallowed hard. "Can we help with anything?" he asked, more cautiously than gently. "Yes," said Helena, looking at Clara. "My daughter will choose whatever she wants." Clara hesitated. Then she walked to the shelf where, months before, she had been humiliated. He touched the same doll, now repeated in dozens, and took a deep breath. "I just wanted to see if she was still here," he said, with a smile on his face. Helena knelt before her. "You don't need to buy anything to prove who you are. You just need to remember that you will never be treated the way you used to." Clara did not take the doll. She took a new dress, yes, and a book she had been dating for weeks. But the most important thing was the sense of justice. She had returned to the place where she cried, now as someone who won, and the best was yet to come. Clara now had a home, a good school, toys, new clothes, and someone who called her daughter. But inside her, there was a part that still didn't know how to deal with so much love. And when everything seems to be going right, that's where ancient ghosts often appear. It started with nightmares. In the middle of the night, Helena began to hear muffled cries coming from the next room. When he entered, he found Clara huddled under the covers, shivering. It was just a bad dream, she said. But it was not only that. They were memories, ancient voices that still echoed within her. Voices of orphanage caregivers saying, "You're trouble. There's no one for you. Nobody want a big child." And, above all, the worst wound, abandonment. Clara never knew why her parents left her there. He grew up hearing that they left, that they never returned. And although he tried to look strong, doubt was like an invisible splinter that bothered him every day. On a rainy afternoon, Helena noticed that Clara was quieter than usual. "I didn't even want a snack, nor did I want to watch my favorite cartoon." She sat on the carpet in her room and stared at a photo of the two of them taken days before. "Is everything okay, daughter?" asked Helena, sitting next to her. The girl was silent for long seconds. Then, his voice almost disappearing, he murmured, "What if you leave me too?" Helena felt her heart tighten. "Why did you think of that, my love?" "Because everyone leaves. My parents went. Afterwards, no one from the orphanage wanted to stay with me. And now that everything is good, I'm afraid of losing everything." "Helena," hugged her tightly. "You won't lose me. I fought for you, and I'm going to keep fighting every day, even when you're afraid." But Clara still didn't know how to believe it. It wasn't a matter of lack of gratitude. It was trauma, and traumas don't disappear with sweet words, no matter how sincere they may be. The following weeks were difficult. Clara began to have small episodes of insecurity. If someone at school laughed around, she thought it was hers. If Helena was 5 minutes late, she already imagined that she had been forgotten. She even began to hide small objects, such as candy or notebooks, for fear that someone would take everything from her again. Helena, patient, sought help. He took Clara to a psychologist specializing in adoption, and together, they began a deep process of emotional reconstruction. In the sessions, Clara drew sad houses, mothers, children. Over time, she began to talk about the nights in the orphanage, about the fear of being alone, about the emptiness of not feeling truly loved. It was there that Helena understood giving a home was not enough. She needed to rebuild Clara's soul, piece by piece. In one of the sessions, the psychologist suggested an activity, writing letters to the biological parents, even without knowing who they were. Clara resisted, but ended up writing only one sentence. "Why did you leave me?" It was painful, but also liberating. The psychologist explained that pain did not need to be forgotten. She could be welcomed, looked at from the front. Only then would she lose the strength to control everything. Little by little, Clara began to trust more, to eat more calmly, sleeping with less fear, to embrace with more commitment. The nightmares subsided, the smiles increased, and on an ordinary night, after hearing a bedtime story, Clara said something that Helena would never forget. "Now I know I'm not a problem. I'm a gift." Helena, with teary eyes, replied, "The best gift of my life." And with that, the voices of the past have finally begun to fall silent. Time passed. Clara was already walking more safely through the corridors of the new school, smiling more often, and even helping other classmates who felt out of place. There were still scars, of course, and maybe there always were, but now she knew she wasn't alone. He had a house. He had Helena, and more than anything, he began to be proud of who he was. But it was on an ordinary Saturday that something extraordinary happened. It was early afternoon when Helena received a call from the director of the old orphanage. One of the employees had resigned, and the place was facing difficulties in maintaining the routine with the children. The director wanted to know if Helena could nominate someone or even donate food and toys, as she had already done before adopting Clara. Without hesitation, Helena said, "Let's go there." When he hung up, he looked at Clara with a smile. "Do you want to visit the orphanage with me? Bring some things to the children?" The question took Clara by surprise. She hesitated. Her eyes were lost for a second, as if reviewing all the sad moments she lived in that place. But then he took a deep breath and said, "Yes, I do. I think I'm ready." They prepared boxes and more boxes with clothes, toys, colorful notebooks, food. Clara chose one by one with affection. "This one was my favorite when I saw it in the windows. Now I can give it to someone." The arrival at the orphanage was silent. The children ran to the entrance as soon as they saw the car. Many did not recognize Clara immediately. She was different, taller, stronger, more confident. But there was one little girl in particular, sitting alone on the swing, with the same lost look that Clara once had, who caught her eye. Clara approached and sat next to her. "Hi, what's your name?" "Leah," replied the girl, without much emotion. "Do you like dolls?" asked Clara, opening the backpack she had brought especially for that moment. Leah nodded, shy. Clara took out a beautifully dressed doll, with braids and a purple dress. "This one is for you. It's called Hope." Leah took it carefully, as if she didn't believe it was real. "Was she yours?" he asked. "It was, but now it's going to be happier with you." The scene moved even some of the employees. Clara spent the rest of the afternoon talking to the children, telling funny stories from school, showing that there was life beyond those walls. And, above all, listening. She understood every silence, every fear, every suspicious look, and, for this very reason, he knew exactly what to say. Before leaving, She gave a long hug to the director, who had treated her with some coldness in the past. "Thank you for everything you did for me," without even realizing it. In the car, on the way home, Helena held Clara's hand. "You were amazing." "It was strange to come back, but now I understand something," said Clara. "I'm not that girl anymore. And maybe now I can be hope for other Claras." It was a day everything changed. Not for money, not for new clothes, but because, finally, Clara understood that her story was not all pain. It was strength. It was transformation. Not only was she rescued, now she was able to rescue. After that visit to the orphanage, something ignited inside Clara. She realized that she didn't just want to have things. I wanted to make a difference. And for the first time, he dared to dream big, a dream she had carried since the difficult times, to help children like her once was. One evening, while having dinner with Helena, Clara put the cutlery aside and said firmly, "I want to open a place where children like Leah feel truly loved, where they know they have value, even if no one has told them that yet." Helena smiled surprise and replied, "And you will. I'll help you." From there, Clara immersed herself in books, videos, lectures. She learned about children's rights, welcoming, child psychology, and even began to scribble ideas of what the space would be like, a colorful place with books, music, affection, and listening. She named the project Casa Esperanza, in honor of the doll she gave to Leah. In the beginning, it was just an idea in a notebook, but Helena, with her contacts and experience, presented the project to influential friends, businessmen, NGOs. The story of Clara, an orphan girl, expelled from a store, adopted and transformed, moved everyone. And then, something almost unbelievable happened. A company in the education sector offered full sponsorship for construction of Casa Esperanza. Clara cried with emotion. She was still young, but she would be the mentor of her own dream. During construction, she made a point of visiting the land every week. "I chose the colors of the walls, the toys, the books." He insisted that there be a room of silence where children could cry if they wanted to, but could also be heard. She remembered every detail that she missed. A hug, "You can do it," "I'm here." Months later, on the day of the inauguration, Clara wore a light blue dress and a ribbon in her hair, just like the one she used to draw when she was in an orphanage. Helena was by his side, proud. Hundreds of people attended. Children, families, authorities. And Clara, with a choked voice, went on stage and said, "One day they told me that I was nobody. Today, I say to every child here, you are everything. And this house is a reminder that you are not alone." Applause, tears, smiles. The impossible dream was now real. But Clara didn't stop there. She began to give lectures in schools, encouraging adoption and fostering. He received invitations from TV shows, was featured in magazines, but always made it clear, it's not about me. It's about the kids who are still waiting for love. And every time she doubted herself, she remembered the first day she was kicked out of the store. He remembered the humiliation of pain, and he smiled strongly. "I'm glad they didn't give up on me." The years passed, and Clara was increasingly involved with Casa Esperanza. His life was now dedicated to welcoming, to transforming lives, but also to healing his own soul. The pain of the past no longer had the same weight, but like any wound not completely closed, it still came back from time to time, especially when the unexpected appeared. It was at a fundraiser for the orphanage that the surprise happened. Clara was on stage, thanking the donors and announcing the next steps of Casa Esperanza, when the door of the auditorium opened with a light, almost imperceptible sound. She had her back turned, so she didn't notice who had entered. But when he saw the reaction of the people, he felt a strange wave of discomfort. She turned to see a tall, simply but elegantly dressed man staring directly at her. Something in her eyes made her freeze. It was as if an old memory had been triggered instantly. The man smiled softly, and Clara felt a knot in her stomach. It was him, the orphanage manager. He recognized her. Clara, in turn, did not know how to react. That man had been one of the cruel voices of her past, the one responsible for repeatedly telling her that she would never be adopted, that she was just another child to be ignored. He approached timidly, as if he knew the situation was delicate. "Clara," he said, and his voice was softer than she imagined. "Forgive me for everything. I didn't know what I was doing." The past immediately came to light, but somehow Clara didn't get carried away by anger. No more. She looked at him, took a deep breath, and said, "I'm no longer that girl you knew. She left a long time ago." He was silent for a moment, as if trying to process her answer. But then, with a slight sad smile, he said, "I heard about your story. I saw you on TV. I know what it has become. And I don't have enough excuses to justify what I did. At the time, I didn't understand what it meant to give hope. I just did what I was taught to do." Clara looked at him and, in a gesture of generosity that she didn't know she was still carrying, held out her hand. "It's okay. The past is behind us." But as she shook his hand, Clara felt something move inside her. Not anger, not resentment, but a strange sense of closure. That meeting was not just a chance to give forgiveness. It was an opportunity to also free himself, to really turn the page. The manager looked at Clara in surprise, as if he was finding a version of her that he had never imagined. He knew that she had become a strong woman, but now he understood that she too had become someone capable of healing her own heart. "Have you really forgiven?" he asked, curious. Clara smiled, and for the first time since he entered the auditorium, she felt that her heart was at peace. Yes, forgiveness is the only way to move forward. And, as difficult as it was, the pain made me stronger. He looked at her in awe. "I knew you had done a great job, but I didn't know how far you would go. I feel honored to see her like this." Clara looked at him, then at the audience, and said, "Now, I am the one who chooses my future, my path, and I will continue to do what I can to change the fate of other children who, like me, have nowhere to go." He nodded, deeply touched by Clara's words. And although the meeting was short, something had changed that day. Clara was no longer the humiliated, despised, and rejected orphan. She had transformed into a woman who now offered the same chance of redemption to others as she herself had received. Clara never imagined that, at the age of 18, she would be at the center of a silent revolution that would touch so many lives. When Casa Esperanza started, I didn't think about the impact it would have. She just wanted to give the children what she herself had always dreamed of, a safe home where love and hope were priorities. Over the years, Casa Esperanza expanded to several cities. Donations increased, volunteers multiplied, and in each new place, Clara saw the same children smiling, finding their space in the world. She saw the reflection of her own journey in each of those faces, and it gave her the strength to keep going. She also began to be invited to several conferences on childcare and human rights. Her story was inspiring to many people, but the most impressive thing was the effect she had on children. They looked to Clara as a beacon of hope, an example that, despite adversity, there was always a light at the end of the tunnel. During a lecture at a university, Clara told her story of overcoming. "When I was kicked out of the store," she said, "I felt invisible, like no one saw me, as if my worth was measured by what I owned, not by what I was. But that changed when I found someone who believed in me, someone who gave me a chance. I want to be that person for other kids." His speech echoed in the packed auditorium. After the event, a young man named Gabriel approached her. "You inspire me so much, Clara. I went through similar situations in my childhood, and I never imagined that I could make a difference. I want to work at Casa Esperanza. I want to help other people like you helped me." Clara smiled, touched by his words. It was no longer about the orphaned and abandoned Clara. Now, it was about a movement, a legacy that was being built. She knew that each child who passed through Casa Esperanza had a chance to transform their story, to become someone who would one day help change the world as well. A few years later, with the expansion of Casa Esperanza to neighboring countries, Clara began to think about her own future, how to ensure that the project continued to grow and help children. She knew that her work would never end, but she wanted to leave an even bigger mark. That was when she decided to found a school of leadership and empowerment for young people at risk called Light and Hope. The school was dedicated to teaching young people about their rights, life skills, and the importance of believing in themselves, as she herself did. And once again, Gabriel was one of the first to join the team as a mentor, now with the responsibility of training future leaders. Years later, at an award ceremony, Clara received the highest award of her life, the Human Rights Award, which recognized her hard work on behalf of children in vulnerable situations. When she went on stage, she looked at the audience and said, "This award is not mine. This award is for all children who have a story to tell, of all the people who believed in them, even when they didn't believe in themselves. I was only one of them, and that's why I believe that we can all change someone's story. The future is written by us." And in that moment, Clara knew that she had finally fulfilled her mission, not only transforming her own life, but also offering the opportunity for other lives to be changed. Clara's legacy would forever be a source of inspiration for all who cross her path. She had become, unwittingly, a true hero. But unlike the stories she read in books, Clara's greatest achievement was not in epic battles or confrontations, but in the simple decision not to give up. And as Casa Esperanza continued to grow and change lives, Clara, sitting on her porch, looked up at the horizon with a quiet smile. She knew that her story did not end there. There were still many children to help, many lives to touch. And that, for her, was the biggest prize of all. If you were inspired by this story and want to continue receiving more content like this, don't forget to give your like and subscribe to the channel. By signing up, you join a community of people who believe in the power of transformation and hope. Let's spread this message together and transform more lives. And of course, leave your comment below. I'd love to know what you think. See you in the next video.